All right, so I previously recorded this video and somehow it got corrupted, so I'm recording it again. Senator Slotkin from Michigan was on Breaking Points, and one of the hosts, Krystal, really hammered Slotkin on the genocide in Gaza. Not even in a bad way, just pressing her with really good questions. And Senator Slotkin's answers were pretty awful, to be honest. So here's my reactions to some of Senator Slotkin's answers on the U.S. support for Israel amidst the ongoing genocide.
So first of all, do you accept that Israel has a policy of enforced famine and starvation in the Gaza Strip?
I think I literally put my name on a letter yesterday or last night that says like a policy of starvation, people are starting to starve. And in general, I mean, I served in places like Ramadi and Fallujah. I watched in 2004 and 2005, Al-Qaeda terrorists drag American citizens behind a vehicle until they died. Right? Like horrible, and then string them up, like a lynching.
Okay.
We still had a responsibility to get aid into Fallujah, despite the fact that we were fighting Al-Qaeda cells in Fallujah, and I have been clear about that.
So this is a crime against humanity. Forced starvation is a crime against humanity.
The occupying power has a responsibility to get aid into the war zone, period.
So
by the law of war.
So in addition, do you accept that the Israeli plan, as reported by Haaretz, as discussed openly by ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, as backed by the President of the United States, is forced ethnic cleansing?
I think we have, as recently as yesterday, the Prime Minister of Israel talking about forced migration into certain areas and then potentially out of the country. That is not legal. That is not on any international standard since World War II. And I've been clear about that.
Okay, so a few things here. First of all, there's no such thing as a non-forced ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is always forced. That's the very definition of it. So Slotkin is admitting that Israel is violating the laws of war. She's admitted that multiple times. But she won't specifically call it war crimes or crimes against humanity, which I think is interesting. But if you openly admit that Israel has committed violations of international humanitarian law, that's the definition of war crimes. And even with her admission that Israel is violating the laws of war, she's still unwilling to restrict arms to Israel. You know, it's great that you're saying it's not legal, but what are you as a sitting United States senator doing about that? In any other context, if this was another government committing ethnic cleansing, or war crimes, or crimes against humanity, or genocide, at a bare minimum, the United States and other countries would be sanctioning that government and the leaders of that country. It's something the United States does pretty regularly. It doesn't always have much of an impact, but it's like a first step of like drawing a line in the sand and saying, like, what you're doing is wrong and we disagree with it. But like, no one's even proposing placing sanctions on Israel. And there have been some efforts to restrict arms to Israel, but they keep getting batted down by everybody who's so pro-Israel.
What I would ask is, listen, I'm a YouTuber. You know, I have my words, that's all I have. But you're a United States senator. Like, you're not the president, but you have power. So what are you going to do? Because so far what we've seen, I mean, you voted for some of the aid that's been used to massacre children and innocents. You know, you have backed Israel, as far as I can tell, you know, from your voting record at almost every turn. You voted for a definition of anti-Semitism that would, you know, codify anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. You voted as a member of the House to sanction the ICC for indicting Benjamin Netanyahu, who you just admitted is a war criminal, you know, by your own words.
You know, it's absurd that members of Congress supported sanctioning the International Criminal Court for indicting Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant. Very clearly war criminals by any measure. Even Senator Slotkin has admitted that they've violated international law. But to sanction the ICC, an independent judicial body, when the United States was one of the key figures in creating international jurisprudence after World War II and the Holocaust, establishing the Nuremberg trials to hold Nazis accountable after these horrible crimes, to sanction the ICC for doing its job is just appalling. And the ICC is only able to indict people and go after folks for committing the worst violations of human rights law, genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So it's a little bit frustrating to see members of Congress supporting this effort, especially those that supposedly care about international law. And frankly, many of the members that did vote in favor of sanctioning the ICC, especially on the Democratic side, I mean, I get that many Republicans don't even believe in international law at all, but many of the folks that were on the Democratic side, many of them are lawyers. They would never stand for sanctioning our domestic legal system. Imagine if Trump decided that he was going to punish a sitting judge because he didn't believe in their verdict or didn't like, what they were doing. They would never support that. And what makes it worse is that many of the Democrats that supported sanctioning the ICC are Jewish. So it makes it look like that, they can't be objective when it comes to Israel. And not to say that everybody who's Jewish can't be. I mean, I'm Jewish and I'm trying to be as objective as I can. But, we should have leaders who consider their votes based on objective analysis of the truth and the facts, not based on their personal beliefs, whatever those personal beliefs are, regardless of if your beliefs in a state of Israel, or if you're a Christian, nationalist and you want to get rid of the right of women to vote, whatever the case may be, your belief should not be what's driving your votes. And I think that's especially true in the case with the ICC.
So are you going to join Senator Angus King, Senator Bernie Sanders in saying no more aid to this country that is committing war crimes against innocent civilians?
I think the first thing, if you're asking about what to do with power, and I would offer that right now Democrats own nothing in Washington. So
don't play powerless with me. You're a United States senator. There are things you can do.
In terms of who runs our foreign policy, I just think it's interesting, right, that there was a ton of protests when Democrats were in charge.
There was a protest in Manhattan yesterday.
Okay. I think it's fair to say, just to be honest, that back and forth, the number of protests that go on now versus before.
Well, they were part of your political coalition.
Well,
and what's interesting here is that Slotkin is trying to play this game that more people protested under Biden than Trump. And, people are protesting under Trump today. They're making phone calls. They're in the streets. They're raising money for relief efforts. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing. People either care about basic human rights and believe what Israel is doing is wrong, or they don't. And then I guess you have this third category where people flat out want to see the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinian people. That's just where we are right now. But for Slotkin to try to make this a political thing is just a distraction and frankly wrong. I'd also say, though, I think during the beginning of this, this war and the atrocities that Israel was committing, many wrongly believed that they could sway the Biden administration to actually do something. You had an administration that was led by a man who supposedly cares about human rights and preventing genocide, had Samantha Power at USAID who wrote the book on U.S. non-intervention in the face of genocide. And many thought that Biden could be pressured to do something. But obviously, many people got that wrong because Biden, has for many years long said he's a proud Zionist. So I think, at the end of the day, again, this kind of core moral beliefs on a lot of places butted up against the Zionist belief that Biden had personally, as well as, some core folks in his inner circle. So now that you have Trump in power, who so clearly does not care about human life, especially Palestinian life, he's closed USAID, is shutting down several State Department programs, basically stopping almost all foreign aid. So, you have that on the one hand. On the other hand, after nearly 2 years of many people on the front lines of this fight having to push back against now the Trump administration, some people are rightfully burnt out. And, they haven't stopped the pressure, but it's also clear that, no one is listening.
Not to mention, Senator Slotkin,
that's fair.
Obviously, I'm here.
Yeah.
I was very upset over the Biden administration policy. And as you can tell, I'm very upset over the Trump administration policy.
Yeah.
So let's deal not in strawman, but me in the here and now.
In terms of the tools that I have, the tools that we have in general, to me, the most important thing is a pressurized campaign to get aid into people who are starving. That to me is the number one, because that's the one is urgent and today. And
but will you cut off aid to Israel so long as they're committing crimes against humanity?
There is a difference between a weapon to protect a country from incoming missiles versus other type. Offensive and defensive weapons are different.
So would you support offensive weapons ban? Would you stop any offensive aid to Israel?
That certainly, to me, would be a place to look. But I'm not going to cut off a blanket next sale on a defensive weapon.
Again, I don't know why Senator Slotkin and others keep focusing only on aid and starvation and not on the fact that the government of Israel and the IDF put those people in that position, right? Bombing nearly the entire Gaza Strip, displacing nearly the entire population. Some people have been displaced several times over the course of the last 2 years. 92% of all residential buildings in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. They've destroyed food production, agriculture, water supplies, hospital. They're bombing people in tents. So yeah, getting food in is a priority, but also stopping the slaughter should be a priority. We're in this kind of weird situation where people are now coming out and saying things like, we don't want to see starving kids. Well, yeah, no one wants to see that. But did you want to see kids getting blown up? Where were you during the bombings? Where were you when several reports were coming out that children were being killed by precise sniper fire? Did you want to see that? I would hope not. This idea of, offensive and defensive weapons, it's just embarrassing at this point. Like, sure, yes, there are different types of weapons, but you have a government that's committing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Senator Slotkin has basically admitted that Israel is committing at least war crimes and possibly crimes against humanity, and yet still wants to send them weapons? Like, what are we even doing here? Maybe there are some defensive weapons that can only be used defensively, but surely some of the weapons could be used for dual purposes. And when you're actively trying to get a government to change its policies, don't you think making sure they don't have a blank check from the American taxpayer and an endless supply of weapons would make them maybe reconsider their course of action, using this as a tool to put pressure on the government and get them to change their policies, at least having it as a bargaining chip on the table? Even when Senator Slotkin responded to the idea of cutting off offensive weapons, it wasn't definitive. She basically said, well, maybe that's a place that we should look. Really? You think? Like, after 2 years of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, you're still kind of on the fence about this? I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how any politician who has been wavering on this issue can ever again in the future pretend as if they care about human rights and international law. I really don't. In so many ways, U.S. power on the global stage has shrunk drastically over the last 2 decades, at least. But in one area, you would think that the U.S. should have some power, and that would be over Israel, given this close relationship that the U.S. has with Israel and how much arms and money and diplomatic cover that the U.S. pours into Israel. And yet, we can't be bothered to even consider cutting off arms when they're slaughtering civilians at such a large scale.
Through. No.
I also reject that because, for example, if Senator Slotkin, if you were asked to support defensive weapons for Iran, defensive weapons for Russia, you wouldn't back that.
No, but Iran, but
they're defensive. They're just protecting civilians, right? So how is it different?
But because Israel's being shot at.
So is Russia.
So is Iran.
Yeah.
So is Russia.
Ukraine's shooting at Russia right now.
I don't understand what her point is here. That yes, Israel is being shot at, but the Palestinian people are being shot at too by Israel. Does that not matter? I guess it doesn't.
I'm sorry. This is the difference between allies, partners, and adversaries.
Why is it an ally then? What are they doing right now which just makes it an ally?
I think this is a great question. What is Israel doing that makes it an ally of the United States? I don't know many that have a great answer to this question. I think it's clear that Israel gets a lot out of the U.S., but it's not as clear what the U.S. gets out of Israel. For years, Israel has disregarded the purported priorities of the U.S., including a two-state solution. Israel has violated international law, destroyed any chance of a two-state solution by building more illegal settlements, which is a form of ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. And still, the U.S. continues to support Israel, even though multiple governments and the many years that Netanyahu has been in government have gone against supposedly the U.S.'s interests or wishes.
I think allied relationships, just like Lithuania right now, an allied relationship or a partner relationship is a long-standing relationship of information sharing and diplomacy. And that is, to me, it's not every day we decide Lithuania is our ally or not. We're allied or not. And
this idea that we're always an ally with a country and it doesn't change is not really true, right? We've changed who we were allies with in the past several times. During World War II, we temporarily were allied with Russia and China, and now we're very much not. Japan bombed the US, now we're allies. So it's a bit ridiculous to say allies are this like unbreakable bond that we can never change. And it's a bad example because unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe Lithuania is committing genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity anywhere in the world. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would say that's probably worth considering the difference between our allyship with Lithuania versus Israel.
Sometimes we have big breaks with allies, right? Sometimes we have difficult moments with allies. Sometimes it goes the wrong way with allies. But an allied relationship is a long-term relationship.
It's hard for me to understand why we should ally. Like, I'm sure you believe in, like, or claim to believe in liberal human rights. Why would we ally with a nation that is committing a genocide and live streaming it?
Sometimes we have difficult moments with allies. Sometimes it goes the wrong way. Like, I feel like she's seriously downplaying the stakes here, like what Israel is doing. This isn't a disagreement on trade or something, like that. This is a fundamental, basic human rights issue. And, the ongoing slaughter of a people by a close ally that the U.S. is providing arms to. Like, it's a bit different.
Can I ask literally, like this, I think about this from the mirror image way, because I do not support the things that Donald Trump is doing, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm an American. So I want other countries to look at America and be like, we can't stand Donald Trump, so we're going to end any longstanding relationship we have with the American people. We're going to cut off any support we give them on information sharing or intelligence sharing. Like, we are not just our elected leaders. And I think that's the thing that's been lost.
Regarding her point about Donald Trump and support that other countries give to the United States, maybe they should consider cutting off, ties or, distancing that relationship a little bit. I mean, if Trump or any other president went totally rogue and was acting as a rogue nation and was committing large-scale mass atrocities, as I would argue that we did during Afghanistan, Iraq, and the wider, global war on terror, maybe allies should cut off ties or temporarily distance themselves from the U.S., put some pressure on us to change what we're doing. I mean, in many ways, that wouldn't always happen or work because we usually bully other countries into supporting us, and many countries rely on the U.S. a lot more than we rely on them. So it's much more of a one-sided relationship. But yeah, I think they should consider that. I mean, we're seeing that a little bit right now, right? With the current situation with Trump's ridiculous tariff tirade. Some countries are not just rolling over and giving in, they're pushing back. And so it's a little rich to say, that I hope this wouldn't happen under Trump like she is. I don't know, maybe it should.
Conversation.
So B'Tselem and another Israeli human rights organization joined the Global Consensus, Amnesty International, some 800 scholars. There was a piece from an Israeli scholar in the New York Times in saying this is a genocide. Do you accept, even Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday came out and said it's a genocide. Do you accept that? And if you do, I mean, what responsibility does a United States senator have for, this is a nation that, we send every year billions of dollars to aid that you have, voted for and supported. Like, what responsibility does a United States senator have to prevent genocide and to stop genocide that we see ongoing?
We have a responsibility up till today to ensure that food is getting in.
Is it
so
a
that
genocide?
People don't starve. I don't know that I'd use that term.
Why?
But it is violating the law of war.
Why don't you use the term though?
Because I think, it's, to me, do I think it's ethnic cleansing, which is what I think of in genocide? I don't know if it meets that definition.
They're announcing
but didn't you
it.
say it earlier that it was ethnic cleansing? You said that they wanted to force it. I mean, this is open from the Israeli government. Like, they're saying it. Their Minister of National Security, they come out and they're like, we don't need shells. We need shells, not food. And we need to encourage migration. They're saying it.
Okay, so the United States is a state party to the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So from that standpoint alone, the U.S. has a duty to prevent and respond to genocide. One of the criminal acts of the 1948 Convention is complicity in genocide. So I would argue that the U.S. has been complicit. And if we lived in a world in which international law was, applied equally, you could make an argument that certain individuals in the U.S. government should be held accountable for complicity in genocide. Separate from that, we passed into law domestically here in the United States the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act, which Trump signed into law in his first term. And it states that it's in the U.S. national interest to prevent genocide and mass atrocities from happening. So domestic law also states that it should be our policy to do this. And I would argue that the responsibility is even greater when it comes to a country that is perpetrating these crimes, is so close to the US as an ally. And we're providing the arms that allows them to perpetrate those crimes. Again, she's only talking about the food and not the bombings, not the drone attacks, not the people that are being slaughtered at the aid distribution centers who are just trying to get food, not the people that are being killed by sniper fire, the children that are being shot at, and as some reports have said, are being seemingly used as target practice, shooting them in the same specific spot multiple times over, including the genitals. Look it up. She's saying that Israel is violating the laws of war, but then she's not sure if it meets the definition of ethnic cleansing, which she considers genocide. First of all, genocide and ethnic cleansing are two different things. Genocide is outlined in that 1948 convention as the intent to destroy in whole or in part an ethnic, national, racial, or religious group. There's no convention that outlines what ethnic cleansing is, but the crimes to commit ethnic cleansing are often considered under crimes against humanity. And ethnic cleansing is the forced removal of a population from an area to make room for an ethnically homogenous group to replace them, which is literally what Israel is doing. And several of Israel's leaders have directly said that's what they want to do. They want to remove Palestinians from Gaza and put Israelis there. It's a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. Slotkin herself mentioned earlier that this was a stated objective of Netanyahu too. So I don't understand where the confusion is coming from. But in thinking about genocide, it's also not just killing members of that group. Article 2, Section B of the Genocide Convention states that causing serious bodily or mentally harm to members of the group is considered genocide if it encompasses that intent to destroy in whole or in part. And Section C states that it's deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So when you look at what Israel's done, they've destroyed or damaged nearly every home in Gaza, targeted and destroyed food supplies, targeted and destroyed water supplies, targeted and destroyed hospitals. They are creating those conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of the population in Gaza, in whole or in part. Frankly, for Slotkin to go back and forth on this, it's just extremely frustrating.
I think the point I was trying to make is it's not just about, like, we have relationships with nations over time, regardless of who their leaders are. We have really tough moments. We have easier moments. But that doesn't, so I'm not willing to say that, like, I hate everything ever.
Sure,
into
but so
the future.
even
She says the point I was trying to make is we have relationships with nations over time, regardless of who their leaders are. Senator Slotkin is basically saying the quiet part out loud, that regardless of if a nation is committing genocide or not, we are going to support them if they're an ally. This is kind of the morally bankrupt position of U.S. foreign policy that we've had for many decades that has led to horrible relationships over the years where the U.S. is propping up abusive regimes and dictators that commit gross violations of human rights against their own people and against people in other nations, right? And we've seen this time and time again play out where the U.S. is propping up a government, a corrupt government, that is committing those gross violations of human rights because supposedly we believe it's in the best interest of the United States. Like, to hell with what is happening to the people on the ground as long as it's in our interest. It's a terrible position, and it has led to some of the most instability and insecurity around the world today. To say something like, I hate everything into the future, like, I don't know what that is. That's like a child's answer. Like, live in the now, right? The now is that Israel is committing mass atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank.
if you accept that they're committing a genocide, you still wouldn't cut off their aid?
I think that defensive aid and offensive aid are different things, and I think at this point,
so
what
if
they're
Nazi
doing
Germany,
every single day,
if Nazi Germany said we want defensive aid, I mean, it's just you have to see where they're all weapons that are being shipped.
Then this, repeating this idea of defensive aid versus offensive aid, it's really embarrassing.
In another context,
the weapons that they're using right now, I mean, to be honest, if you look at what's happening on the ground, the military part of this conflict is, for the most part, over. What they are doing, every single day is around aid, and they are hurting people around the delivery of aid.
They have slaughtered over 1,000 people who were starving people just trying to get aid.
That is That's not high-intensity bombs. That's not the weapons that we were talking about 2 years ago. It's just not. I'm sorry. Every single day, the military reports that I read, they are traditional, this is a military that has a bad strategy. It is not the bombs that we were seeing 2 years ago.
It's not a military that has a bad strategy. The strategy is forced starvation and ethnic cleansing. That's their strategy, and they're accomplishing it very effectively with the full backing of the United States government, including, sadly, Democrats.
Well,
and so
the fact that she could sit there with a straight face and say that the military component of this war is basically over, I'm not sure what she's seeing or reading, but Israel has been bombing Gaza every day, drone strikes, people are being shot at every single day. Like, this is just horribly misinformed, or she's purposely downplaying what Israel is doing. It's frustrating because you really can't tell the difference these days between many Democrats and Republicans, between the most stalwart defenders of Israel versus, supposedly more moral members of Congress. There are a few standout members of Congress that have been trying to push back. But for the most part, it's a big, broad brush, and a lot of the talking points are the same.
We have to ask your last question because your staff is telling us, do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that I know plenty of people who think they should.
Mm-hmm.
I
it's
don't.
Kind of a cop-out answer, don't you think?
I literally, I just guess I'd have to look at the definition. I certainly have had my tough moments with that organization. And
so you stop accepting their funding?
You gotta get your facts straight. I have not been endorsed by AIPAC. I'm sorry. I was the first Jew elected to the Senate that was not endorsed by any Jewish group. AIPAC, J Street.
You've been the recipient of their funds.
In 2018, when I first ran, people who were members, yes. But I've not been endorsed since then. And I just got to be honest, I think that this is where facts really matter. I've had very, very difficult conversations with my colleagues in that organization.
I find it really frustrating and concerning that she seems to care about the facts at this point in the conversation about AIPAC, but doesn't seem to care about the facts when it comes to the ongoing mass slaughter of Palestinians. I can't believe that she said that's the thing that's really important here.
I have one more question I have to ask you. We do the show. I really do my best to try to uphold basic human rights, Palestinian humanity, oppose the killing of innocent civilians wherever that happens. And I have to tell you, I feel really guilty that I'm not doing enough. I think all the time about, I'm a mom, I think all the time about those moms who can't feed their babies. Mm-hmm. Those babies are starving to death. And I just want to know, you're a United States Senator, you did vote for some of the bombs that were dropped on refugee camps. When kids have been sniped in the head, tents firebombed, people set on fire. The entire Gaza Strip turned into rubble. And now we're seeing these emaciated bodies of babies starving to death every day. And I
know what you can do.
Does it eat you up? Does it eat you up? Do you think, what more could I do? Do you regret any of your votes? Do you regret
let me tell
any
you what
sort
I
of
was working on this morning. A group of Jewish rabbis and Muslim community leaders came together with a proposal that we are working on just getting, if we can't get other aid in, at least get baby formula and nutritional supplements for children in. Let that be kind of a green light, never has a problem. No one's trying to eat baby formula other than a baby, right? That is the proposal that I've been working on all night and this morning. So in terms of what we're trying to do, there's not a moment that goes by that this isn't something that I'm working on and something that my own community, not online, but my own community has practical things that they want to do. They're willing to raise the money. They're willing to buy the formula. They're willing to do whatever we need to do to get it shipped in. That's how I spend my time.
But you're not willing to cut off aid to Israel?
That to me is the most effective thing that I can do today.
Again, she's saying that Israel is blocking all humanitarian aid, and it's such a Herculean effort to get even baby formula in. That's why we should be putting pressure on the government of Israel to change its policies and behaviors. You don't have to just accept it. And worse, not just accept it, we keep sending them more weapons. What are we even talking about here? I have to say, I applaud the Breaking Points team, and especially Krystal Ball, for this interview. I agree with her. Our members of Congress are not doing nearly enough. Collectively, we're not doing nearly enough. I individually am not doing enough. No one is doing enough. And we need to be doing more. And we need to demand better. And Democrats really need to step up and decide if the Democratic Party is going to be the party that's actually for human rights everywhere, or follow this traditional US playbook and being willing to throw human rights by the wayside as long as whatever else we're doing supposedly furthers our imperialistic agenda. I have to say, watching the genocide in Gaza play out in real time with so little pushback from our elected leaders has really broken me. I don't know how we come back from this. I don't know how we move forward. I don't know. I mean, we need to demand better, but I don't even know if better is out there. Like, at least not from many of the politicians today.